That's a good point.
So that book, I must ask you about that book now.
Which one?
Can poetry save the earth?
Yes.
That is a question.
It is. It's an important question.
A field guide to nature poems.
Yeah, my stepfather, Peter, he sent that to me, and yeah, I must say it's an excellent book. I mean, it's basically an exploration of a lot of different poets, some of whom you wouldn't
Thank you for
consider.
the tea, by the way.
Cheers, brother. You know, a lot of poets who you wouldn't even consider to be nature poets per se, but some of their poems touched upon nature as a subject, and it's pretty profound essays, you know, about these poets, about their contact with nature. So, for instance, William Blake.
You get that?
To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. That's something that Blake wrote, and of course he was a person in tune with nature, in tune with his own nature and larger nature, and most of us can probably encompass. Yeah, and then of course that question, you know, can poetry save the earth? I don't know. I don't think that this book, you know, really answers that, but it definitely deepens the question.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't think poetry can save the earth, but I think poetry can save something.
Yeah, no, poetry can definitely save lives. As most arts, and they've saved my life plenty of times. I'm very grateful to them. And not necessarily for, you know, maybe the textual things that they say, but sometimes it's just me making sense of it, like, you know, in my own head. Well, that's of course the key. That for me is what art is all about, actually, you know.
About making sense?
Yeah, just finding something in it that will save your life. And maybe, you know, when I say save my life, it's not necessarily save your life in, like, you know, you're gonna die, but maybe sometimes. But we are gonna die. That's inevitable. Maybe it helps you accept that, which is something I think of as well, because I think of mortality a lot too. But just saves your life in a, like, okay, so tonight I need something, you know, because I feel alone and stressed and anxiety and maybe I just encounter a work of art of any, it could be a song, it could be a poem, it could be, I'm always looking for something, you know, it could be a film, and it could be an interview.
Yeah.
But, you know, with interviews nowadays, I think you just need, you're not given enough time to sink into the atmosphere, you know. It's a lot of editing, and there's a lot of, like, anxiety in them, and I just don't think that you understand much out of them, so.
Well, I like these questions about what poetry itself is. Like, you know, he cites this from Emily Dickinson: if I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold, no fire ever can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only way I know it. Is there any other way?
Wow.
And it's something I've explored, you know, quite a lot.
Is there any other way?
Well, citing different, you know, poets' definitions of poetry. Coleridge said, you know, poetry is the right words in the right order. Leonard Cohen has a wonderful definition. Poetry is just the evidence of life. If your life is burning well, then poetry is just the ash. And then I came up with my own. You know, poetry is like cocaine. You do it in lines. It gets you high. And if you do the good stuff, you'll be addicted for life.
That's nice.
That's probably one of my most potent, you know, definitions. And then, you know, I came up with a definition that, to some extent, is, you know, corresponding with Emily Dickinson. But, you know, it's the idea of poetry as not a rainbow, but a brainbow. When the rain of feelings is pierced by the sunlight of intellect. And I do believe that is one element of poetry for me, that bridging of feeling and thought. because it's not enough just to feel. You've got to also have intellect. You've got to have some clarity in your language and expression. At the same moment, it's not enough just to have that clarity. That can be also very scientific and cold. And you need to have some kind of warmth, some kind of feeling underneath the words. And Seamus Heaney has a brilliant essay about feeling into words, talking about feeling into them. Dylan Thomas talks about the idea that you either write into language or you write out of language. And he said that in all of his true poems, he's writing out of language. It's not like he's trying to confine the wilderness of his feelings into these cages of words. No, he's actually trying to liberate the zoos of his unconscious, really to take it out of the defined, which again, spinning through metaphor. The Chinese have a saying, ancient Chinese, of course, if in a true poem, if you remove all the words, the poem is still there. So that's also a kind of identification of that concept that poem is certainly not just built of words. It seems to be built of words. The same way a house seems to be built of walls, but where do we live? Do we live in the walls? No. We live in the empty space between the walls. Which brings us to a modern day poet, Tom Waits, who said, a house without love, that's just a home where nobody lives. So you need love, you need feelings. That's where the home really is. It's not in some walls. And the same way in a poem. It's built of words, but the poem doesn't live in those words. The poem lives outside and beyond those words. So that was quite